People are taking my pictures and they're creating new profiles, and they're on dating profiles all over the place.
Has to provide a means of authentication and also integrity for the people. So it's like, hey, if you're really serious about this, why don't you just call me?
There's so much corruption. These transnational organizations who are using all the means of being able to take money from very vulnerable people. And what bothers me the most is when someone's trying to do that while the other person is just trying to find human connection. That hurts me.
Human loneliness is the biggest exploitation in the world, right?
I didn't know LinkedIn is a place that also you can fall towards corruption, towards any kind of fraud.
So LinkedIn is a safe haven. Think about it. That's where everyone wants to go brag.
Dude, give your security a chance. To have a really good EP team with you, those are also just become friends, because they're the safeguard of your life, but not even that, is that you're putting money in their pocket. You're supporting that EP person's family.
What's going on, y'all? My name is Vincent Vargas. I'm the host of the Time to Head North podcast, brought to you by the North Group. Security refined by intelligence.
Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of Time to Head North. This is brought to you by the North Group. Security refined by intelligence. You guys, if you guys are interested in getting any kind of corporate security, corporate security, personal security, family security, if you have any questions, even in the intelligence department, please hit up tngdefense.com. You guys go check them out. Hey, I got a good friend with me today, and I think this is gonna be a great conversation because we haven't got to do this. And you know, I wanted to invite him because he is an expert in several things. And so we're going to bring him on and let him talk. So Ricoh, if you don't mind, give just a good bio of your background, your expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ricoh Danielson, U.S. Army combat vet, went to deploy to Iraq and Afghanistan. I was in Battle for Fallujah, Battle for Ramadi, and also in Jalalabad. So some pretty high frequency places. After that, did the PMC world, PSD world, working for companies like Blackwater and all these other organizations. And then got a really wild hair up my butt doing OGA stuff. Really, you know, everyone dreams about the 2-3 man teams in the middle of nowhere. It's just you and the boys, right? Actually, you and I spent not in the same time, been in the same area, but doing narcotics interdiction in Nogales, Arizona. So it's spent some time there. Former law enforcement as well. I did some time with the U.S. Marshal Posse in Phoenix, Arizona. And then I had a brilliant idea. I was like, hey, I'm going to go to law school and then do cyber law. And all my team friends were like, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? Like, this is not who we are. Like, we go to countries. I'm like, I got it, guys, but my body, my injuries are not going well. So I was doing OPDS, Office of Public Defense in Maricopa County for a while. Help start up veteran court and also get our own pod in the jail cell system for the veterans and whatnot. So it was pretty interesting. And then I left the space, did my last pump in 2014 in Afghanistan, and doing more about private deal over there. Got popped, and I was like, hey, I'm good. I think I need to recover on that one. And then got really heavily into the cybersecurity space, and now I found myself doing ransom negotiation, cybersecurity for big organizations like McDonald's, Schwab, and whatnot, but more specifically helping out individuals, combat cybersecurity and also cyber scams. The most recent one that I ran into was the cartels were pretty wild, sophisticated organization they have over there.
Really? We're going to have to talk about that. But, you know, let me ask you about something that happens to me on the daily. Okay. People are taking my pictures and they're creating new profiles, and they're on dating profiles all over the place. And what they're doing is they're really enticing these older women. And it seems like now that I've done my own personal research on this, just on my own, just kind of paying attention to it, and it seems like, you know, they're attacking this certain demographic that probably doesn't understand social media very well. Mm-hmm. They obviously are very lonely. These are single women in the 50s and 60s potentially, and are looking for some kind of, you know, they just want a relationship. They want some kind of communication with someone else. They want to feel loved. And they end up getting them with fraud and taking thousands and thousands of dollars off these women. And they end up finding me eventually, right? And they end up finding my wife, and they say, hey, your husband did this. And I'm like, whoa. So, you know, excuse me. It's a really interesting thing that since social media is kind of a newer phenomenon for that demographic, they don't realize how easily they can be fooled. But what I've noticed in what's happened more recent is they've been using AI techniques to create videos with my face. Tell me what you know about all that space.
Yeah, so spoofing, cyber spoofing, and also deepfakes and whatnot are getting very, very good. What it sounds like to me, there's two type of threat acting groups that do that, and remember these guys are ransomware threat actor gangs. This is $1 billion industry. So what it is, the one of them, one in India or another one in Romania, and it's one of those two organizations because that's their specialty, right? Anything below $1,000 a month or $1,000 a day, they can fly underneath the radar of the OFAC sanctions. So and also the bank transactional reporting links. So I wouldn't be surprised if, unfortunately, these people are targeting that specific amount of money and that specific type of individual. And the reason to do that is, one, you're HVT, you're a high value target yourself, unfortunately. So because you have a good presence, right? And then you have your charm on top of that, you're a good looking dude and all this stuff. And then you couple that and you're like, okay, where you already have the enticement, you already have the buy-in from the people, and it's like, oh, Vinny gets to reach out to me. Oh my God. And then romanticize. These are romantic schemes. We see these on LinkedIn quite a bit at the CEO and CFO level, where
Really?
Oh yeah. We worked a case in Phoenix. A lady got taken for $500,000. And it was bad. Like, it was a month-long relationship from some dude in Romania. We did our forensics analysis, threat acting negotiation. And it was just some dude in Chechnya. And this is all he did. And we found his computer and he's like, he had tons of profiles and it was kind of what they do. So
are you able to prosecute someone like that?
So we do have the means for the extradition. We do have a team readily available to go in different countries. It does cost when we work with the local law enforcement there. Yeah.
So let me ask you, we'll get to LinkedIn after because I think the corporate side is very important. And I know that there's been some stuff that's happened to a personal friend of mine. But like, let's just talk about the average endgame user, mom, dad, guys like me and I'm just one of many other veterans whose faces have been used in that similar scam.
How do
we protect ourselves? I'm sure they've used your face on a few as well.
Dude, let me tell you, man, especially when I was trying to get into the acting side of the house, buddy, let me tell you. They were like,
there might be some opportunities in the near future. We'll talk about that offline. But yeah, please tell me, how do we protect ourselves with just regular social media?
Yeah. So, I've actually taken a step further, right? Remember, the thing relies on three different things, right? CIA, the confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity of a person, right? The confidentiality, they've already established to that communication. The integrity and authenticity are the two missing parts of the equation. So what you have to do, unfortunately, is use Vinny Rock, or me as a person has to provide a means of authentication and also integrity for the people. So it's like, hey, if you're really serious about this, why don't you just call me? Because I've had threat actors reach out to me and be like, hey, blah, 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 why don't you send me some money? I'm like, oh, cool, right on. Let me call you right quick. And they always say either it's noisy or I have a bad reception. Tests. If I'm a consumer, if I'm a general user, I need you to do this thing called syntax, right? It's like, hey, how are you? Cool, send me something back, right? And at that point, have them engage with you. Hey, do you mind jumping on a Teams meeting with me? Okay, cool. Or Zoom or something like that. Chances are they're going to say no. And then that's red flag number one. At that point, you need to be like, hey, we're good here, right?
Okay, so I'm going to humanize that for the 50, 60-year-old woman. So if you get into a relationship with someone online, and you're now questioning whether this is a real person or not, you've seen their face, it feels real, everything looks real, ask them to contact you immediately at that moment. And if they hesitate, then it's most likely because they're pulling a scam, correct?
Correct. And think about it, like back in my day when we were dating and trying to court somebody, you pick up the phone, you're like, hey, how's it going, right? My wife always tells me, she's like, hey, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I just want to call and say hi. And she's like, oh, you can always text me. So now we're coming full circle. So a lot of the older generation, let's just say older ladies who are the target on this one, it's okay to pick up the phone. And if they don't answer, that's your flag right there. Or if it's an alternative means like WhatsApp or Signal, or not a US number, you'll see it very quickly.
Interesting. So another thing they've been doing, so there was a lady who contacted me saying, oh my goodness, my friend's in love with you. Are you sure you're not the one? I said, I'm not the one, I promise. I said, next time, and I always tell them this, FaceTime them.
Yeah.
FaceTime them right now.
Yeah.
And you've seen enough of my videos to hear my voice. FaceTime and see what happens. She said that they did FaceTime him. And somehow, right, this is a more professional organization, was able to use my face and somehow do some kind of deep fake. Can you explain how that's even possible?
Yeah, there are new applications out there and they're meant for fun. Okay. Just like Snapchat was meant for fun. There's a lot of human trafficking, sex trafficking on that. Same premise applies with these applications, these new apps are like, hey, I can take Rico's face and put it on Rocco's body, right? Dangerous combination right there. So that being said, like if you really think about it, you can do it to anybody and anything. And it takes nothing to say, if you could topple two applications, deepfake applications, so you take somebody's face and somebody's voice. It's not too hard, very old technology, and it's very easy to do.
Man, and so it's going to be really hard for, someone who's not, look at, man, me and you have been in this world for so long. We can kind of, it doesn't pass the test for us for certain things, right? Red flags are flaring left and right.
Yep.
But for, like I said, the average user, they don't think like that. Like my mom and dad don't think like that, right? They still believe the news is the truth, right?
No, absolutely.
Right. Man, it's so, okay.
Question everything. Like I'm Mexican, right?
Yeah.
And I remember when my grandmother was alive, she would always question me. She's like, where are you going? ¿Dónde vas? And I'm just like, I'm going here. I'm like, what's the questions? Be a Mexican grandmother and be asked the question, like, where are you going? Who are you with? I'm like, I'm just going.
It's funny because it's on the same lines of catfishing. I used to have an old podcast back in the day. And one of the things we used to talk about is if you're texting a girl, and this was years ago, and you're not sure if it's a catfish, tell them to send a picture with a shoe on their head. And we say that because they don't have that in their camera roll, right? You can't just pull this off the internet. Nowadays, you can pull that off of some kind of AI app that can actually create something like this.
Yeah. The other one we used to do, and what we found is in sex trafficking was please hold up a newspaper with today's date, right?
Yeah,
that was another one we saw as well. So absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's an interesting world that, there's so much corruption. There's so much, there's these entities, these transnational organizations who are using all of these, all the means of being able to take money from very vulnerable people. And what bothers me the most is when someone's trying to do that while the other person is just trying to find human connection.
Yeah.
That hurts me.
Yeah. Human loneliness is the biggest exploitation in the world, right? And as we become more remote workforce and we do things remotely at home, the human nature becomes more and more lonely, right? So, I mean, threat actors know this, especially the very sophisticated ones like nation state. Oh, they love that stuff.
So you said these are using, is there anyone in Africa doing this? Because they always say that I'm a soldier in Africa and I need an iPhone. And so these women are sending iPhones.
So iPhones and actually MacBooks are very high commodity in India and also Africa, Niger, Sierra Leone, Congo, when I was there, and also in Cameroon. So you might be those areas. So there are these things called farms, right? And this is found in South Korea, India, Niger, Mexico, Jalisco, and whatnot. And what it is like these farms of picnic tables, and they're just the laptops. And they're like, here's your script. Here's what you're going to do. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's one all the way in Africa.
Wow. Crazy. Okay. So how about the corporate? Let's talk about the corporate space. I had a friend he's a very prominent businessman here in the Dallas area. And he had someone clone one of his CFOs and make a massive deposits. And they created this message train right on email. Then it went to LinkedIn, and then from LinkedIn they said, "Let's jump on video." And they did. They went all the way as far as pulling the video. And the only reason the CEO realized there was something going wrong here is that he actually had the CFO with him. So it was the faulty. They didn't realize they were hanging out at that day, but they were about to make a very large transaction to a different organization. And I didn't know LinkedIn. So I see LinkedIn as a very professional location. I didn't know LinkedIn is a place that also you can fall towards corruption, towards any kind of spam or fraud.
Yep, absolutely. So LinkedIn is a safe haven. Think about it. That's where everyone wants to go brag. Hey, I rose this type of series E money of $300 million. Like, oh, this is right for picking. If I'm a threat actor, I'm laying on LinkedIn right there, just doing my reconnaissance and whatnot. What it sounds like to me, unfortunately, your friend who had a business, one, a high value target, number two, net worth is probably known public, and number three, a lot of businesses, unfortunately, just because of due to budgetary requirements, do not take cybersecurity really, really like serious. Not to say that they weren't, but as serious as they need to. And chances are probably got spooked, their email got compromised, and then from there it's just game on, changing bank routes, stuff like that. So they're really good. They can do that within about 2 hours.
Wow, I just find it fascinating. And I never thought of that LinkedIn. So those of you guys who are listening, if you have a LinkedIn, be very cautious because it is a place, it sounds like it's ripe for the picking for those who are high value targets, right? Who have high positions in corporate offices. Like you can just see who they are immediately on it. It's a social media that gives you all the information.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lawless place, and in a good way, right? And unfortunately, if you're like, hey, I'm going to go attend this conference, one, you just gave away your position, and number two, you gave away your demographic of what you're trying to target for business perspective. So now you open up everyone else. So yes, it's a point of bragging, but at the same aspect, it's a point of like true good intelligence.
Man, I never thought of that. And I'm over there. I was just building my LinkedIn the other day. Like, let me just tell them everything.
No. A lot of things I even have a LinkedIn. I put private. Because if we have a business deal now, or if there's a project I want to be on, now I just like, hey, just reach out to me directly, right? And so that's how I do things. Yeah.
Wow, it's interesting. So it brings me to the thought of the recent murder of the high valued CEO and how many mistakes he might have made via social media by either projecting where his location might be. What I found fascinating was that he was able to, the murderer was able to assassinate him, but like to be there right at the right time at the right place, in which gave me the idea that somehow he had a kind of a routine that he was sticking to with this, the assassin can figure that out. And just very curious on what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, as well as I know. I mean, going outside the wire, they always take you different routes, right? Just in case you get engaged by enemy combat. Same premise applies here. Unfortunately, a man, a father, a brother, a husband was killed, right? And it's very hard because it sends a message to other CEOs like us, or like, hey, you're a target, right? Number two is this more than likely he was probably fed some information, because if you look at the pedigree of the young man, it doesn't really add up. Right. It doesn't add up. I mean, I know some heavy hitters. I know some, PMC guys, and they're to the manor. And this just doesn't add up. Number two, the reconnaissance had to be done for him, or he was doing it beforehand. And number three, more than likely, there has to be a motive, right? And what is the motive? So
yeah, the whole thing is interesting. Either this kid is some kind of genius, and this was a well thought out, disgusting plan, or there was some help in this. It's still an interesting case, and it's a fascinating one that I'm curious to see what comes of it. But for those who are high valued CEOs, I think should take notice of the sad part about security is that everyone wants security after the fact. It's a reactionary. It's a reactionary decision instead of being prepared beforehand with let's just have good security now. It's the same thing what happens in school shootings. Something that I think is what we should be having, which I really enjoy Texas, is they have active law enforcement on the school grounds. I find that I do armed protection at one of the schools here voluntarily. When they need me, they call me and I suit up and go. I call in sick. I say, I'm out, let's go. And I think it's fascinating that not all states do that. Being ready with security is important, but what also keeps them, I like to think about is these high value CEOs make a lot of money, and it's not that expensive to incorporate a security plan. I would say cybersecurity and physical security, right? Both, I think, kind of a robust 360 system should be what's important, I think. But I always find it fascinating. That's when you start getting calls. I got so many calls after that happened. People were like, hey, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I'm shocked he didn't have security. I'm shocked.
I'm beyond shocked at that. Like an operator, a really good operator, I'm talking tier one guy, from the group, all the way from the bats, all the way to Marine Raiders and SEAL teams. I know guys who work for $375 a day, all the way to $1,000 a day. And if you do the budget, you don't need a team; you need a one-man, two-team, right? And you don't need a combo, you don't need a limo or anything like that, up armor or anything like that. So I mean, I'm very surprised that he was just kind of walking around by himself.
You know what's wild is that a personal assistant is probably double what you would pay
without
a security guard.
Without
you know what I'm saying? What you would pay for a personal assistant, someone to grab your coffee, your mail, to kind of schedule for you, you'd probably pay them in that level of world. You'd probably pay them around $60K.
Oh, way more than that, 200.
Right? Yeah, probably more. Right? Yeah, the high valued versions, right? Dude, give your security a chance. Like, it's the crazy. Like, to have a really good EP team with you, those are also just become friends. They become your community. Because they're the safeguard of your life, but not even that, is that you're putting money in their pocket. You're supporting that EP person's family, and which makes it even more important to just do a great job. And if that guy had 2 EPs with him, right, executive protective officers, one would have came out first, one would have kind of gone to the rear, boop, taken, got him. You know what I mean? It would have been, every situation dictates itself, but. Point is, it was a shock to me to hear how much he made annually, his company, how much they make, and how they didn't have that in corporate. And I think it's going to start making a shift. I think you're going to see a ripple effect of change that has to happen, because we're in a society that is starting to create these small factions of, rebellious, I don't even know, extremists.
Yeah. So, one of the things that when I was doing executive protection myself, we're all the way in Afghanistan, and it's like we were protecting these State Department people that were making $95,000 a year, but we're, high value operators here, right? And it didn't make any sense. So you're right. Why shouldn't these CEOs who make $10 million a year invest $100,000 on 2 operators? I think what's happening now is we're going to see a faction, just exactly like you said, is where people are saying this is okay. And I think America's on this very weird teeter, because it is not okay to do this thing. It's not okay to condone it. Whether you think the business person made a bad decision, is affecting the world, I get it, but you can't just go around killing people because you don't agree with them.
Yeah. I said this on another podcast. It was just that it feels like a small wave are somehow justifying that. And it's disgusting. I've seen the social media on it, and people, I made comments, people made comments on me, and like, how could you, like, they're saying you're a weak man for thinking. I'm like, hold up. It's human life. This is human life. And this individual put himself in a position to work for a top corporation. If they're not making decisions that you like, there's got to be a better way than all out anarchy. Right. We cannot have a world where we devalue human life because they're in a position that's greater, right? Or a financial position that's better. It really degrades our human connection with each other, but also it makes it uncomfortable just to step outside. If someone's jealous of me, they can kill me, and everyone's going to rejoice for it.
Yeah,
because, that's a disgusting idea. And you're right. This small faction of people, this wave that's happening right now, is a very scary and slippery slope. And it's one that I think our high valued corporate leaders will have to protect themselves. And I know they have been recently, but I just find it very fascinating.
There's a word for people who condone the murder of high-ranking people or officials and people of public influence, and without any disregard, that's called terrorism. So
yeah. Yep. Yeah, we're talking. This is domestic terrorism at its finest. Yep. You have all these CEOs scrubbing their names from websites and wiping them out just to make sure that they're not the next target. And there was people posting targets, and there was social media saying like, "Oh, here's the name of another one." And like, it was disgusting to watch. For someone who's lived his whole life the fight against good and evil, it felt like, whoa, what a weird time we're living in.
Yeah, you're doxing basically. You're basically seeing the next target, and that's not good. We have to get away from that precedence, right? There's ways to change things we want to see in the United States in our own household and whatnot, and that's about taking the progressive approach on security, but also on your life, right? And you can't just go around murdering people. So.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. So talk to me, man. If me and my home, me and my wife, what are some things that we probably make mistakes on daily that we could try and make some choices that would keep us safer from hackers, from all of it?
Okay, so it is Christmas, right? Christmas coming around. Feliz Navidad, everybody. So the one thing I'll tell you right now is those things are those clickbaits, those ones redirects are out there and they're well and alive. Number two is going to be
What happens to those when you do those?
Yeah. Yeah. So whenever you click on a clickbait, right, it's going to be like, hey, it's going to redirect you. I need you to re-sign into somewhere, whether it's your email, your bank account, or whatever. Don't do it. Stop. There are things called, there's a link called Virus Total, right? And you can take that link you're about to click on and plug it in there and see if it's good or not. And that's the first thing I do. Like anybody sends me a link, that's the first thing. And this is the first thing I did over here on this link. I was like, oh, I totally forgot. Got it, no problem. And I was like, okay, it's good. So I'll give you the warm or fuzzy. Number two is I always validate, like, hey, is this human? Okay, cool. All right, I'll send you the cash, no problem. And then number three, unless it's cash, I wait a day. I have a 24-hour rule. I'm like, I'm not going to wire you any money. I'm not going to send you anything. I'm waiting because I'm going to watch. And then
Why is that?
Yeah, I always wait. And then anything above $500, I ask my wife. I'm like, hey, what do you think? Let's set up for a day. I learned that lesson.
Yeah, that's good. But why do you wait a day? How does that help mitigate any kind of issues?
So remember, threat actors have three things and they play off of pain, fear, and pleasure. Okay. They need to put you in a lot of pain in a very short amount of time. They need to inflict fear upon you. If you don't do this thing will happen. And the pleasure and the remedy is the money transfer. If somebody's in a rush, if Vinny calls me and is like, hey, Rick, I need this and this, cool, no problem. How bad do you need it? Let me drive down to wherever you are and I have cash in hand. And I have never met anybody who says no to cash.
Yeah.
Listen, yep, cash. And they're like, no. Now you have a red flag.
Man, it's such a scary time. I don't click on any links. Like, even if it's like my mom's in it, I'm like, I'm good. I call her and say, what was that link?
Exactly. Some of the things you can do is just, be very, very mindful. Pick up the phone, be mindful of the links you have stuff. When it comes from a technology perspective, the more you can secure your connection to other things like the connection to the internet, like VPN, if you can do that, great, go for it. Number two, always just kind of like be mindful of your footprint of where your data's at. It's not too hard to find. You can get in with Experian, some sort of organization like that and be like, where's my data? And they'll tell you where it's at. And then start knocking those things out, right? Number three is going to be the social media footprint. The more you do on social media, the bigger target you are.
Yeah. I know that, man. Being in a position where I'm a public figure, I'm like a C-list actor right now, whatever. But, part of our world is putting yourself out there, is highlighting your shows, is doing this. And, there's probably 1,000 fake social media accounts with my name on it, with my face, using my pictures. And then one thing I do is I share my family, right? Rico, right away, you're like, hey, how's your family, right? Like everyone knows I share my family. Well, that puts them to also be a target. And so, what I don't do, I don't share the school that they go to. I blur that stuff out or I edit it however I have to. I don't post where I'm at until I leave. Once I leave and go home, that's where I send the picture, I post and I put tag, the location, because I've had people show up to a gym to see me and that was like uncomfortable. Yeah. Yeah. You show up like, hey, I'm about to get my workout in and all of a sudden you're like, dude, I saw you post. You're like, whoa, hold up.
It's not weird. Yeah.
And so there's things that I've learned throughout time to like kind of be more safe with the family. And, it sucks when social media is your life. You have to be very cautious about how you do it, and then you also understand that the good comes with the bad. The attention you get there also comes with this size of stalking threats. I've had my life threatened multiple times off of a character I've done on TV.
What?
Oh yeah, because in the Mayans, I killed somebody, one of the characters, and I had people giving me death threats because of it. And that's just the strange little world that we live in, right? That you just don't know who's struggling from any kind of mental health or who, who just doesn't understand reality in some capacity.
Yeah, I get that as well. Now that I'm on the news a lot, I'm a national security advisor to the news. I'm on the news weekly now, which is pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
I never thought I was going to be doing that, but I do a lot of keynotes, and it's like it's really weird because I always kind of laugh at them. People are like, "Hey, good job, brother." I'm like, I don't know you. I'm not your brother. Sorry. And who are you? What's going on?
You never know, man. I've seen enough movies and seen enough shows that I'm always nervous about that one person who, for some reason, has an infatuation that eventually turns deadly. Right?
Yeah.
That's
It's in the veteran community, as we know, we've seen it plenty of times.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Another thing, people are purchasing a lot of stuff online, especially like Facebook Marketplace. How do you do that in a safe manner? How would you do that in a safe manner?
Yeah. So that's actually interesting because we worked a case where people would actually go around looking at prom dresses and then finding their next target, and you're just like, what? Like that's a whole nother step layer deep. I'm like,
Yeah.
I would actually go ahead and do a. If I'm a parent, right, I would actually have a secondary account specifically for selling, buying, whatnot, and tie it to a burner phone number like a Texted Now or something like that. And the reason I would do that is because that's 2 additional layers of protection. They don't know who you are; they just see the product. That's how I would do it.
Yeah. Love that. That's a great idea. I'm going to convince my wife to do that crap. She sends you to the weirdest places, bro, to the darkest alleys just to pick up like shoes. Like, bro, I'm going full on tacked out, bro. I got to carry my M4 to the places she sends me to go pick up stuff from Marketplace, man.
Like, what kind of blender is this, honey? I know it's Korean blender, but come on.
It's crazy. Like, man, my wife is crazy with that stuff. We talked earlier about the cartel, and you were saying some of the fraud stuff they were doing. I would love to hear more about that, and I'd love to hear, with this podcast, we're just hoping to get people prepared, like mentally prepared for what's to come or things that could potentially happen. And so I'd just love to hear your ideas on that.
So you've been on the cartel for a long time. We see your videos. We see it. I was on the JCNCF inside Joint Narcotics Task Force. I actually had a family member, his father passed away. They chopped his head off in Nogales, Sonora. And I was like, so I know the cartel and I know what they're capable of. In the last 5 years, we've been recently seeing the cartel shift. They're like, hey, we're in the killing game. They're in the drug game, all this stuff. But like, what about the fraud game? And they stood up these huge call centers, right? And these huge technology centers in Jalisco, Mexico, Guadalajara, Sinaloa, stuff like that. And it's bought and paid for by the cartel. They're very upfront about it. And they're like, our job is to go seize and scam assets. So they're going after home titles, anything that's automated. Seen big in Miami, by the way. And then the other one is obituaries. If they can scam somebody who recently passed away, they'll take it because it takes so long for Social Security to be decommissioned. And they know these things. And they're like, hey, we're just going to go ahead and assume the Social Security, rack up all this debt and collateralize the debt, right? And usually the debt is some sort of non-secure debt, like a credit card. But what they do with that credit card is go buy, hard assets like cars. They can take back to Jalisco. They can strip down. They go to, buy houses or condos under $250,000, right? Because that'll fly underneath the radar. So
it's wild, man. They've become a business, right? And even though it's not legitimate at times, they're just businessmen. They are the cartel. They buy and sell commodities, and whatever those commodities are, right? So, it could be drugs, but it could also be avocados, right? I had a story recently where they essentially just went to an avocado farmer and said, this land is now ours. Uh-huh. We'll give you, you get this much, the rest is ours, right? And so just completely just taking someone's livelihood, just brute force. And if they don't, plato y plomo, you silver lead, you either do it or you don't, you'll be killed.
Plato platano, right? That's what they usually say in Dominican Republic. Colombia. But the other thing you have to be very mindful is I am always playing chess. I'm like, how big is this going to get? And if you look at the Chinese influence in Mexico, it is getting huge.
Yeah.
The Chinese communities that are all in Chinese that are in the middle of Mexico, you're like, okay, what's going on there? And they're pumping this in, whether it's good agriculture, bad agriculture, but also they're bringing in the bad as well. And the Chinese criminals are even more sophisticated when it comes to that type of stuff.
Well, dude, I don't need to take too much of your time. If we let's wrap this up with just one more time. Can you go over some of the things that people can do to try and identify if they're talking to someone who is a catfish or a scam? And then the last is what they should be prepared for during the Christmas buying fiasco.
All right, no problem. So catfish scam, number one, nothing's wrong. Pick up the phone. If you think you're talking to Vinny or Rico or whomever, get on the phone and say, hey, can I just talk to you real quick? I'm on driving right now. Do you mind if I just call you? If you see any red flags that they don't want to FaceTime you, they don't want to talk to you, or they don't schedule time to talk to you, then chances are you begin flagged. Number two, if they try to implement some sort of like the three things, right? Pain, fear, and pleasure. If they have an issue, they need something urgent and they want money, that's going to be red flag number two. So
yeah, what I've seen in that though too, Rick, I'll add is that they convince these women to send sexually explicit photos and then they hold it over their head.
Yeah, so sextortion, remember the threat actors need to have some sort of leverage on you, right? So, whether it's pictures of your breast, full nude, or even, men who send the penis pictures, we have to be very mindful of what you send because once it leaves your phone, it is in the wild. So it can go anywhere very, very quickly. So if somebody's asking that and you're not in an intimate relationship with them, don't do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when it comes to the Christmas holidays, Feliz Navidad, everybody again. So one thing I'd be very mindful of is UPS, if they're coming from a +000 phone number and they're like, your tracking number is off, don't click on it. Or if you do click on it, just copy that URL and run it through something like VirusTotal, okay? If you don't know it, don't click on it. And then the other one is Rico or Vinny is not going to reach out to you. The police, the FBI is not going to reach out to you and say, I need you to go to Walgreens and give me gift cards. It doesn't work that way. That's called a ransom. That's an extortion. If the FBI or Rico or Vinny wants to see you, we will show up at your house, and like, hey, let's talk, right? So that's to be mindful of. And then, that's kind of it.
No, I appreciate it, man. And how about those who is there a website you know of just off the top of your head that you can help remove some of your social footprint or just help protect that?
Yeah. So there's a company called there's a book called Extreme Privacy. I highly recommend reading that before you do that. And it was written from a guy I actually know. His name is Michael. He used to work for the Secret Service and the FBI in the cyber crimes division. And if you follow it to the T, you can disappear off the face of the earth. Great book. Number one. Number two, there are means to it. Now, these companies really have no responsibility to do it, but they will work with you to remove all your stuff. Usually there's a link that says, hey, remove my media, each individual. But first, you have to do the classification of where all your data is at, right? Number one. Number two, then start going that way. If not, number three, you can always engage an attorney. They're very affordable now in regards to this specific service. You say, hey, I want all my media gone. And then you send a letter of demand. Say, I demand it be removed or penalties of this is this.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, brother. If you don't mind, share with everyone where they can find you and learn more about what you do.
Yeah, you can actually look me up on YouTube, Ricoh, RICOH, Danielson, or just hit me up on Instagram, Ricoh_Danielson_. And then, those two places right there.
Awesome, brother. I appreciate your time, man. Thank you.
Roll anytime.
Later.